These results tell a pretty serious story in Wisconsin. Big shifts toward the Democratic Party.
Holy Toledo, holy smokes, holy cow. What are we talking about here? I mean, look at these shifts. Okay, and I want to put this into a historical perspective for you. Dems, liberal, exceeding the previous presidential vote. So in 2025, 2026 cycle, we're talking about exceeding Kamala Harris. Look at this. We're talking about exceeding Kamala Harris, the liberal candidate did, by 21 points. 21 points. And this is part of a pattern, right? In Virginia governor, we saw the Democrat there exceeding Kamala Harris by 10. New Jersey governor by 8. And this is even better than what Democrats had back in the 2017, 2018 cycles, where they were exceeding Hillary Clinton's baseline, but by 12, 4, and less than a point. So this time around, oh my goodness gracious, holy cow, holy smokes, holy Toledo. And of course, remember, Democrats took the House in 2018. And I will note that Wisconsin Supreme Court performance last night by Chris Taylor was the best for a liberal candidate in an open seat in at least 30 years.
So this was the race that we saw last night in Wisconsin, a Wisconsin Supreme Court seat, a 9-point swing there. What about Georgia in perspective? That was a special election for Marjorie Taylor Greene's House seat. Put that in perspective.
Yeah, you think a 21-point overperformance versus the Kamala Harris baseline is impressive. That ain't got nothing on what happened in Georgia. Look at this. Okay, again, putting this in perspective, 2025, 2026 U.S. House special elections. How much did the Democrats outrun Kamala Harris's baseline from 2024? Look at this. In Georgia, 25 percentage points. My goodness gracious, that beat all the other Dem overperformances, and they've overperformed in all of them. So we're even getting higher than the highest of heights. We're talking 13 in Tennessee, 7, 17 in Arizona, 7, 17 in Virginia, 11, 16 in Florida, 6, 23 in Florida, 1, and all of a sudden we're talking 25 points. The biggest Dem overperformance in a special congressional election since 2017, when Doug Jones won that Alabama special Senate election.
Yeah, and I got to say, some of the county data in Georgia and Wisconsin that we saw overnight, even better for Democrats in some key places they're looking for here. Harry, we've talked about this before. I don't like to recycle old things, as you know. I like new, but this is super important. What do special elections, what do they tell us about outcomes in midterms?
Yeah, I've used this slide before, but I'm going to recycle it because I'm going to give it extra special energy this morning to make it brand new for you. Brand new slide. Okay, special elections and midterm results. When a party outperforms in special elections, why are we looking at these specials? It's because 5 out of 5 times since the 2005, 2006 cycle, that party went on to win the U.S. House of Representatives. And Mr. Berman, I will note the Kalshi prediction markets really are taking these results and saying, oh my goodness gracious, because look at this. Chance Democrats win in 2026, both the House and Senate. On January 1, it was 29%, up like a rocket now, 51%. That Democrats don't just win the House, but win the Senate as well.
Yeah, that's the both thing right there. Having a more than 50% chance to include the Senate also would be big for Democrats. Harry Enten, thank you very much for that.
Holy smokes, folks.
Given the political wins and whatnot, is 6 points really a big enough lead for Democrats?
Well, I would say this, Mr. Berman, and that is that this lead is historically low for Democrats at this point with a Republican president. Because take a look here, and I'm taking a look at the average of all the polls. Dem generic congressional ballot lead at this point in the cycle with the Republican president. On average, their lead's actually slightly less. It's 5 points. That's less than it was back in 2018 when it was 8 points, and way less than it was during the 2006 cycle when it was 11 points. So yeah, Democrats are ahead, but they're only ahead by 5 with a president whose net approval rating is bordering on -20 to -30, depending on what polls you look at. You'd make the argument Democrats should be way ahead, and they're just only sort of slightly ahead.
Now, to be clear, 5 points might be enough for them to retake the House, which is really a narrow margin.
Yeah.
Would not take much at all for Democrats to get this.
Would blow it.
The Senate is a different matter.
Yeah, the Senate is a different matter. I think 5 points is enough to take back the House. But in the Senate, 5 points is almost certainly not enough if you apply it to the Senate map. Why do I say that? Because let's just take a look. GOP would win the Senate with this map. Let's say Republicans only hold on to the states that Trump won by greater than 10 points. That would, in fact, give them the Senate 51 to 49. Why? Because what you would see is that the Democrats would flip North Carolina, they would flip Maine, but Republicans would hold on to Ohio, they'd hold on to Texas, and they'd hold on to Alaska because Donald Trump won all of those states by greater than 10 points. And I will note John and I were talking, you have the NCAA tournament going on. This is sort of the chalk scenario going on where the most obvious events actually do occur. Because take a look, during the Trump era, look at this, flip the Senate seat, midterm and presidential years. States the other party won by 10 plus points in the last presidential election. 0, 0, 0 times did a party flip those states. So we're talking about places like Texas, Alaska, Ohio, where Trump won by double digits.
Which is why the Democrats might need a bigger lead than they have now if the Senate is really in play. What else is going on now for the Democrats that maybe should cause them concern?
What might cause them concern? Why is that generic congressional ballot lead so low? Because just take a look at this. Net favorability. Party ahead at this point. Midterm years with the GOP president. In 2018, Dems were up by 12. In 2006, on net favorability, which party you like more? Dems were ahead by 18. Republicans are actually ahead on net favorability at this point by 5 points. So Democrats are just simply put running behind their previous benchmarks, and they need to be running well ahead of them if they want to take back the United States Senate, given that math.
How are they doing with Republicans and Republican-leading independents?
Yeah, let's start off with Tucker Carlson, who has been in absolute free fall with Republicans. I mean, just take a look at this. Look at this trend line. Tucker Carlson's net favorable. Back in March of 2024, when he and Donald Trump were very close friends, look at this. He was at plus 54 points. Look at where he is today at only plus 7 points among Republicans, and that includes GOP-leaning independents. I mean, that is a drop of what, 47 percentage points. My goodness gracious, when you go up against Donald Trump and you want to appeal to the Republican base, to quote the movie Good Burger, you go on the grinder, and that is exactly what has happened to Tucker Carlson, who has absolutely collapsed among Republicans.
So if it is a choice between the president and Tucker Carlson among these voters, what do they basically say?
Yeah, they choose Donald Trump basically every single time. Look at this. Okay, the exact same poll, this UMass Lowell poll. Look at this. Net favorables among Republicans. Again, this is Republicans plus Republican-leaning independents. You see Carlson on the right side of your screen at plus 7 points. Look at where Donald Trump is at plus 61 points. And this is actually a little bit low for Donald Trump. In other polls around the same time, he was even higher than this. Again, he is crushing Tucker Carlson. What is this? This is a 54-point advantage for Donald Trump over Tucker Carlson when it comes to who is more popular among Republican voters. And of course, this isn't even just talking about the MAGA base, where Donald Trump is running an approval rating somewhere between 97 and 100%.
Okay, so what does this mean for Tucker Carlson going forward? Say Tucker Carlson wanted to build some kind of a platform where he could run for office, say president.
Yeah, okay, so you see Donald Trump crushing Tucker Carlson here. Take a look at this. Look at the Kalshi prediction markets when it comes to his chance, Tucker Carlson's chance to be the 2028 GOP nominee for president. It's just 5. When you can put it on one hand, you know it's low. It's just 5% that Tucker Carlson actually has enough support within the GOP, at least those who are putting their money where their mouth is, to actually be the GOP nominee in 2028. Marco Rubio and JD Vance are running well ahead of him.
Okay, so again, in this imaginary world, if the prediction markets are wrong, Tucker Carlson were to become a candidate, how might he do?
Okay, why don't we take a look against the most likely Democratic nominee, Gavin Newsom? And this is, I think, so important because it's not just that Tucker Carlson struggles now with Republicans. He is electoral poison when it comes to general electorate. So Gavin Newsom versus potential GOP nominees in the 2028 presidential matchup. Against Tucker Carlson, look at this. Gavin Newsom crushes Tucker Carlson by 11 points. JD Vance actually beat Gavin Newsom in this poll by 3. So Tucker Carlson, very much struggling, runs way behind the GOP baseline in the general election as well.
You pick Newsom because he's leading in some of these early polls.
He's the most likely Democratic nominee in the prediction markets at this point.
Interesting. Vance beats him right now, but Tucker Carlson, not so much.
Not so much. Not well liked among Republicans and not well liked, hated among the general electorate. Yeah, okay. So you want to talk about a state that Donald Trump has won 3 times, but it looks to me that Roy Cooper, the former governor of the great state of North Carolina, has a real shot here. Look at the Kalshi prediction market. Chance Cooper, the Dem, actually wins this race. His chances have gone way up. Back on October 7th, if it was 63%, of course, that was 6 months ago. Now, look at this, an 86% chance to flip a Senate seat in a state that Donald John Trump won by 3 points, and he is the clear favorite at this point, the former governor.
Now, we call it a chance for a Democratic breakthrough, right?
Yes.
But one thing I do want to point out is there have been Democrats in the Senate from North Carolina before, fairly recently, but maybe I'm dating myself here.
I think you're dating yourself a little bit here, Mr. Berman. Why do I say that? Because, in fact, the last Democrat to actually win a Senate race in North Carolina was back when I was in college. It was Kay Hagan back in 2008. In fact, the only living former Democratic senator is John Edwards, who won all the way back. The last midterm win was in 1998. I was in elementary school there, grammar school there, to really dating myself. That is how long ago. But as you pointed out, this 2008 was a wave year. And what you see is when Democrats do well nationally, and they are doing well right now, you can, in fact, flip a Senate seat, as right now Roy Cooper is forecasted to flip in North Carolina.
All right, so in a wave year, Democrats can do well because maybe the president's dragging the incumbent party down in the state. What is the president's approval in North Carolina?
Yeah, okay, so Donald Trump has won North Carolina 3 times. He won it by 3 points back in 2024. But right now, he is dragging Democrats down, because just take a look here. Look at this. Okay, Trump's net approval rating in North Carolina. John's off on the side laughing. Look at this. In spring of 2025, Donald Trump was 3 points underwater overall. Among independents, he was 18 points underwater. Look at how low he has fallen now. Among independents, he's 42 points underwater, and overall, he's 15 points underwater. Right now, North Carolina is not a pink state. It is much more of a purple, dare I say, light blue state, with how unpopular Donald Trump is, dragging down Republicans, and he may, in fact, push Roy Cooper into the Senate.
And again, once again, I'll just point out the independents here, and that is a staggering. And I was only laughing at your physicality. You must burn thousands of calories during this segment. All right, we're talking about it. The president's net approval there. How about the war?
How about the war? This is just another thing that I think is dragging down Republicans in the state. Look at this. Net approval of U.S. military action in Iran among North Carolinians, among all voters, 19 points underwater. Again, this independent number, look at this. We're talking 41 points underwater. This war, if it continues on, will continue to drag Republican candidates down across the political map.
What are you seeing about Melania Trump and how her polling is shifting?
Yeah, I would say that the American people really don't care for Melania Trump. Take a look at this. All right, let's take a look at Melania Trump's net favorable ratings. Look at this. The lowest ever. The lowest ever. We're talking about now 12 points underwater. If you go back a little bit more than a year ago, she was 3 points above water. You go back at this point, about this point in term number 1 for Donald Trump. Look at that. She was 30 points above water. So at this point, historic lows for Melania Trump. These numbers are absolutely awful.
One of the questions is why the shift now? But also, I guess, you need to look at this always in the historical context of how does she line up against other first ladies?
Yeah, okay. If we look at this historically, the worst ever at this point in term number 2. Look at this. We got her at 12 points underwater. Look at the rest of these first ladies on the board right here. They're all way above water. 42 points above water for Michelle Obama, 46 above water for Laura Bush, 25 points above water for Hillary Clinton, who was not always the most popular, and 50 points above water for Nancy Reagan. And I even looked at Joe Biden's numbers at this point in that presidency. Of course, that was term 1. She was above water as well. So this is the worst at this point in a presidency as well. Melania Trump breaking records in the way that you don't want to break records. Historically awful she is. The American people really don't care for her.
And you also, I'm saying you have new numbers or another look at the impact or the appeal that her appeal after her documentary came out?
Yeah, okay. So you asked in question number 1, you said why? What is one of the reasons why? And I think one of the reasons why was this documentary. I think a lot of people saw it as political, even if she didn't want it to be. And you could just see it here. This is real world data. This is not just the polling data that shows the lack of appeal, historic lack of appeal that she has for a first lady. Look at this. Some of Melania's budget sheet. Look at this. The budget, rights and marketing, $75 million. That was what is estimated to have been spent by Amazon. Compare that to the box office, both domestic and international combined. We're talking about $17 million. That makes this a bomb. There was a lot of talk when the film came out. Hey, you know, it had a good opening weekend. But then basically it stopped making money. So unless Amazon is able to make this up through streaming, this is going to be a historic bomb. Amazon spent a ton of money on it. And look at that. Simply put, the money was not made back. That coalesces, that combines with the polling data to say that Melania Trump is historically unpopular for a first lady.
So interesting. Good to see you here.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. John?
With Artemis up and away, a lot of folks are wondering When are we finally going to go back to the moon? And there's a lot of interest in doing so, in part thanks to Artemis. Just take a look here. Look at these Google searches. Literally up like a rocket. Hello, you know, I had to say it. Look at this. Up 669% versus last month. That is the highest ever for a month. We are in it right now, higher than at any point since 2004, since we were doing Google searches. And I think that the interest level we're seeing right now in Google will translate over to the actual polling data, because if we look at the polling data before Artemis went up in the sky, look at this. Should be going to the moon, should going to the moon be a priority? 57%, the majority of Americans said yes. But look at this, a very sizable portion, 41%, said no. Now, I will note one of the things that is so interesting about going to the moon and basically all of this travel up into space is it's bipartisan. It's bipartisan in an era in which we really don't have much bipartisanship. So what we see is majorities of Democrats and Republicans actually said that going to the moon should, in fact, be a priority. And I got to admit, that's not so much of a surprise to me necessarily, because again, in this era in which we have such deep polarization, my goodness gracious, I mean, we talk about it all the time here. You and I talk about it. Look at this. What is the event that created the most America pride, the most pride in being an American? CBS News polled this back at the end of the last decade. And you know what? Even 50 years after we went up, and we went to the moon, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, the event that was number one was the moon landing. The moon landing was still number one 50 years after the fact. And again, I think we need national pride. So much levels of pride are so low. Going back to the moon may, in fact, be just that antidote in order to recreate that pride that we had back in 1969. Of course, there is that question of who will actually go to the moon. And many Americans, including myself, kind of want to pass the buck a little bit, because take a look here. Do you yourself want to go to the moon? Just 32%, 1 in 3 Americans say yes, they are the ones, they themselves want to go to the moon, compared to, look at this, 2 in 3 who say, you know what? Nah, we're good. We'll stay on terra firma. And you know what? I kind of feel that as well. I kind of like terra firma. And I'll note that majorities, just as we were looking at the majorities of both Republicans and Democrats say it should be a priority to go to the moon, majorities of Democrats and Republicans say, nah, we're good here on terra firma. But look, Artemis is creating a lot of national pride. A lot of folks are asking themselves, when are we going to the moon next? And I think that is a question that is going to be asked as we continue to watch those astronauts be up there way beyond the clouds. One of the most interesting little nuggets from our latest CNN SSRS poll is that Democrats have, get this, a 6-point advantage on the generic congressional ballot, and they are doing so despite the fact that the party has a 28% favorable rating. So how the heck are they doing this? How are they almost seeming to pull a rabbit right out of the hat like a magician? Well, it all comes down to this key block of voters, this key quarter of the electorate. That is among the 26% who dislike not only the Democratic Party, but the Republican Party as well. If you look at their choice for Congress, look at this. Democrats have a 55% to 24% advantage. So it turns out that the Democrats, in the minds of 26% of the electorate, are the lesser of two evils. And that is why they lead in the race for Congress right now by 6 points overall. Now, this 31-point lead that Democrats have right now amongst those double haters, that is very, very different from what we saw 4 years ago when Republicans took control of Congress. Take a look here. Okay. Among voters who dislike both parties, again, those double haters, the choice for Congress. This time around, we were talking about it. Democrats with a 31-point lead. Look at what it was back in 2022. In the exit poll, Republicans won those double haters by 17 points. And that is why they were able to take back the U.S. House of Representatives, flip control of that chamber 4 years ago. This time around, it looks like Democrats are going to do it again on the backs of double haters. Double haters again saying, you know what? Democrats are the lesser of two evils. And the idea of being the lesser of two evils really gets at what a lot of voters who are Democrats are feeling, Jessica, who are Democrats. Take a look here. How Democrats feel. This is how voters who are Democrats feel. Look at this. Only 63%, just 63% of Democratic voters actually view the Democratic Party favorably. We're talking about only about 2 in 3. In fact, a little bit less than 2 in 3, though within the margin of error than 2 in 3. But look at this. Democrats who plan to vote for the Democratic candidate for Congress in 2026, 96%, 96%, near 100, near that unanimity, right? Why? Because Donald John Trump is the motivating factor for Democrats. Amongst Democrats, 99% of them disapprove of Trump. This 99% looks a whole heck of a lot like this 96%, very much unlike this 63%. So the bottom line is this, Jessica Dean, as we sit, I don't know, what is it, 6 months until the midterms? Let's see, April, May, June, July, August, September, a little bit more than half a year away, okay? A little bit more than half a year away. What we're dealing with here is really simple, which is Democrats are leading in the race for Congress by 6 points, despite the fact that they have a favorable rating of just 28% because they are the lesser two evils, especially among Democrats. To me, it looks like there's a real chance that Viktor Orban goes down to defeat. Just take a look here. This is a Kalshi prediction market. Look, Chance Orban is Hungary's prime minister after the 2026 election. You go back to the beginning of the year, it was basically an even split. 48% chance that, in fact, he would be the prime minister after the election. Down it goes, down it goes. We're looking now at just a 31% chance, about a 1 in 3 shot. And I was also looking at the numbers pre and post JD Vance visit. If anything, they might have gone down slightly, but there really has been no impact. JD Vance not helping out an ally of his abroad.
Kate was talking to Congressman Don Bacon from Nebraska yesterday, who said it's really unusual for overt political activity from a president or vice president campaigning for a foreign leader there. Is this the type of thing you think, based on the polls, that Americans want to see?
No, I was already shaking my head but when you were asking the question, because the American people want the focus to be here domestically, not abroad. Just take a look at this. Take a look here. Look at this. Trump admin is focusing too much on foreign matters. 58% of Americans believe that the Trump administration is too focused on things abroad. What they believe also is there's been too little focus on domestic matters. Look at this. 60% of Americans believe there's been too little focus on domestic matters. Now, of course, the Iran war is part of this, right? But this is just part of a larger picture, the belief that the presidency and the administration of Donald Trump in his second term, they have taken their eye off the ball. They are looking abroad when Americans want them looking at home. And of course, JD Vance going and campaigning for the prime minister of another country that is pretty far away from here is just part of a larger picture that the American people dislike.
So Vice President Vance, how's he doing? How popular?
Yeah, JD Vance is not doing too hot to trot at this point. Look at this. Okay, JD Vance's net popularity, this should actually be a plus. There we go. Plus 3 points. Then we go to minus 18 points at this point. That is a 21-point swing in the wrong direction. JD Vance started off his vice presidency in plus territory, and now he is in negative territory. Down he goes. JD Vance getting dragged down along with the President of the United States.
Where does he run? Maybe along with, maybe because of that we don't know that. But where does he rank among other vice presidents?
Yeah, you look at other vice presidents. Look at this. At this point in their vice presidency, historically the worst at this point in a vice presidency. Kamala Harris was at minus 13. Mike Pence was at minus 7. Joe Biden was at plus 4. Dick Cheney was at plus 37. This might be part of a longer trend of vice presidents becoming unpopular, but we can say J.D. Vance is historically the least popular vice president at this point in their vice presidency.
Yeah, that is notable. It may just be a thing where Americans over time, we just hate everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Increasingly hate
But
everything.
I love you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, even though a lot less than you did in 2002.